They say hospitals are places of healing. I say they're places where the veil is thin. Welcome to the Nightshade Clinic, a secret place in Seattle where the patients aren't the only ones fighting for their lives. My name is Emma Voss, a nurse seeking refuge. But I found myself in a place of sterile horror, given 3 strange rules just to stay alive. What's the most unsettling place you've ever worked? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to take the night shift with me, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Because in this clinic, the reflections don't always show you what's real. The first shift begins now. I used to think the only ghosts I'd ever see were the ones that haunted the linoleum corridors of the ICU. The silent, trailing specters of grief and failure that followed me home after a lost code blue. That was before I took the nursing job at the Nightshade Clinic. I did. After what was nestled discreetly in a sleek, anonymous glass tower in downtown Seattle. It was an opulent, hushed facility where the patients were whispers, anonymous meant for public record, and where survival, I soon learned, depended on 3 utterly insane rules. Always use holy water to sanitize medical equipment after each VIP patient. Check patient pulse with fingers wearing silver rings. When you start craving blood after night shifts, you've been converted. The clinic is a temple of sterile silence. But the polished stainless steel surfaces reflect things that aren't there. Quick, flitting shadows with too many limbs and the wrong angles. The last nurse who held my position, a woman named Sarah, apparently had a moment of carelessness with the 3rd rule. Her locker, still sealed and awaiting clearance, smells faintly, sickeningly, of rust and decay. My first day was a study in jarring contradictions. The clinic itself was a masterpiece of minimalist design, Italian marble, hushed lighting, air that smelled of money and medical-grade ozone. It felt more like a luxury spa than a place of healing. My new superior, Dr. Lena Cross, was equally flawless. She was a charismatic, brilliant anesthesiologist in her mid-30s, with a warm, disarming smile and eyes that seemed to understand the exact weight of the trauma I was running from. "Emma, we're so glad to have you," she'd said, her voice like smooth velvet. "Your record is impeccable. I know the intensity of the ICU can burn anyone out. Here, things are more controlled, more deliberate." She introduced me to the other night shift nurse, Carla Monroe, a woman in her late 40s whose face seemed permanently set in a mask of grim disapproval. Carla's nods were curt, her words clipped. She moved with a brittle efficiency, her eyes never lingering on mine for more than a second. The orientation culminated with the head nurse, a severe woman named Miss Albright, handing me a laminated card. On it were the 3 rules. I laughed, assuming it was some dark, gallows humor prank for the new hire. Miss Albright did not laugh. "These are not suggestions, Miss Voss. They are our clinic's specific infection control protocols. They are absolute. You will follow them without question." Her tone was flat, devoid of emotion, which was somehow more terrifying than an overt threat. Later, a young, friendly medtech named Ethan Patel showed me the ropes of the supply room. He was a welcome island of normalcy in this sea of unnerving professionals. He pointed to a locked cabinet. "And that's the special sterile solution for the VIP instruments," he said, lowering his voice. "Dr. Cross's proprietary blend. We are not supposed to ask what's in it." He nervously handed me a small, unmarked glass vial of clear, odorless liquid. "Holy water?" The thought was so absurd I almost laughed again. But the earnest fear in Ethan's eyes stopped me. My first patient was a senator with an aggressive, unexplained dermatological condition. His skin wept a thin, dark fluid, and his eyes were wide with a silent, primal terror. The procedure was simple: debridement and application of a clinic-specific unguent. As I was cleaning the stainless steel instruments afterwards, using the solution from the vial as instructed, I felt a scalpel in my hand become suddenly, impossibly, ice cold. The metal seemed to throb, with a life of its own. I glanced down, and for a heart-stopping second, the reflection staring back from its polished surface wasn't mine. It was a distorted, elongated face with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched into a silent, agonized scream. I dropped the scalpel with a clatter, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I looked again, it was just my own pale, frightened face looking back. I wrote off the incident with the scalpel as a byproduct of stress and fatigue, a hallucination, a trick of the light. It was easier than confronting the alternative. The next evening, I found a small, velvet-lined box in my new locker. Inside lay a set of 3 simple, unadorned silver rings. A printed note from admin was tucked inside. Per clinic policy, these rings are required uniform for all manual pulse monitoring due to potential interference with our patients' sensitive electronic implants. It was another rule, another piece of the creeping, illogical puzzle, presented with a bland corporate justification that made my skin crawl. I slid them onto the fingers of my right hand. They felt cool and heavy. My patient assignment for the night included patient #1913, a man named Jonas in a long-term comatose state. His chart was a bizarre, looping narrative of unexplained declines and miraculous resuscitations. His room was at the end of the hall, colder than the others, the air still and heavy. As I approached his bed, I followed the new protocol. I placed my silver-clad fingers on the frail, paper-thin skin of his wrist. The moment the silver made contact, his body went rigid. A violent, shuddering convulsion arched his back off the mattress. His eyes, milky and unfocused moments before, snapped open. They weren't milky anymore. They glowed with a faint but undeniable crimson light, like the embers of a dying fire. His head turned, locking his gaze on me. His lips, dry and cracked, pulled back from his teeth, and a voice that was not his own. A dry, rasping whisper that felt like it was spoken inside my own skull, slithered out. "I can smell the old grief on you," the voice hissed. "He favors that vintage." Then, just as suddenly, the light in his eyes died. His body went slack, and he was comatose again. The only evidence of the event, the frantic, beeping spike on his heart monitor. Shaking, I retreated to the nurse's station. I needed to know who had been here before me, who had quit or been fired from this madhouse. I asked Ethan to help me pull the personnel file for my predecessor, Sarah. "That's a tough one," he whispered, glancing nervously down the hall. "Dr. Cross has those sealed, but he owed me for covering a minor mistake of his earlier, and his curiosity was piqued." He returned 20 minutes later with a tablet, his face pale. "Most of it is locked down, encrypted, but I got the final sign-off sheet." He showed me the screen. Sarah's departure was logged, with a final entry signed by Dr. Lena Cross. The reason for leaving was listed as resigned due to acute personal health reasons, exhibited signs of severe anemia and advanced psychological distress. Anemia. The word hung in the air. As I was leaving for the night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. Found something in the deep archives about Sarah. A blood test from her last day. It's weird. The iron count is 0. Not low. 0. Like it was. Erased. Meet me tomorrow before shift. Ethan never made it to our meeting. When I arrived for my shift the next evening, his station was empty. His locker had been cleared out. His nameplate removed. I asked Carla where he was. "Patel resigned," she said, without looking up from her charts, her voice flat. "Family emergency. Moved back east." The lie was so blatant, so poorly constructed it was an insult, a warning. People who asked too many questions here didn't just get fired. They disappeared. The shift was a grueling 12-hour descent into a quiet, sterile hell. My last patient was a young woman bleeding out from an unspecified post-operative complication. We hung bags of O-negative, the rich, crimson fluid, a stark banner of life, against her pale skin. As I was documenting the transfusion, I found myself staring at the blood bag. The smell of it, the coppery, metallic tang, suddenly filled my senses, and a strange, gnawing emptiness opened up in my gut. A deep, primal craving. It wasn't just hunger. It was a specific, horrifying thirst. My mouth watered. I felt a visceral urge to tear the bag from its stand. I recoiled, a wave of nausea and self-disgust washing over me. I stumbled to the restroom and splashed cold water on my face, my reflection looking pale and wild-eyed. When you start craving blood, the third rule, the final rule, Sarah's anemia. It wasn't a deficiency, it was a symptom of what? I didn't want to imagine. Panic gave way to a cold resolve. I went to Sarah's old locker, the one that still held the faint, sweetish smell of decay. Using a bent paperclip, I worked the cheap lock until it clicked open. Inside, behind a false panel at the back, was what I was hoping for. A small, leather-bound diary. Its pages were a chronicle of Sarah's descent. The first entries were normal, full of observations about the strange clinic. Then came the fear. She wrote about the silver rings, about a patient whispering things he couldn't possibly know. She wrote about the hunger, the shame, the terror of it. She wrote about her growing suspicion of Dr. Cross, who seemed to watch her with a predatory clinical interest. The last entry was a frantic, terrified scrawl, the pen having torn through the paper in places. Lena knows I know. She watches me. The basement. It's not storage. It's a chapel. To a god of scalpels and blood. She's coming for me. Tucked into the last page was a thin plastic keycard. A sub-level access card. On it, Sarah had scratched a single word with a pin, witness. The blueprints I'd seen online had labeled the sub-level as geothermal maintenance. Sarah's last message insisted it was something else entirely. The elevator ride down to the sub-level was silent and slow. A deliberate, heavy descent into the clinic's hidden heart. The doors hissed open, not to a maintenance corridor of pipes and machinery, but to a hallway of polished obsidian, cool and silent as a tomb. The air was frigid, carrying the sharp scent of ozone and the faint, coppery tang of old dried blood. This was no geothermal plant. This was a sanctuary, or a slaughterhouse. The hallway opened into a vast, circular chamber. In the center, illuminated by a single, focused surgical lamp, was a room that was a grotesque parody of an operating theater. The walls were lined with stainless steel, but also with shelves holding archaic medical texts, bound in what looked disturbingly like human skin. Jars of formaldehyde held preserved organs, each one marked with a strange spiral symbol, and bearing some unnatural tumorous growth. The operating table wasn't steel. It was a massive, polished slab of black obsidian, intricately carved with channels designed for fluid runoff. Fear, cold and sharp, warred with a grim, investigative resolve. Sarah's keycard, I realized, didn't just open the elevator. I found a discreet panel on the wall. A swipe of the card and the section of the wall slid open, revealing a small, dark observation room. Its one-way mirror looking out over the obsidian altar. Inside was a single chair and a bank of monitors. Most were dark, but one was active. A recording. My hand trembled as I pressed play. The grainy black and white security footage showed the theater below. It showed my predecessor, Sarah. She was strapped to the obsidian slab, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it transcended the screen. She looked pale, feral, her body emaciated. She was one of them, converted. Dr. Lena Cross stood over her, but not in her usual pristine lab coat. She wore dark silk surgical robes, embroidered with the same spiral symbol as the jars. Her face, usually so warm and empathetic, was a mask of ecstatic, focused intensity. She was chanting a low, guttural language that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The words themselves feeling sharp and dangerous. As Lena raised a ritualistic-looking scalpel, a swirling column of shadow and black smoke began to coalesce over Sarah's body. It had no definite shape, but I could perceive things within it. Long needle-like limbs shifting planes of scar tissue, and two burning points of red light that I knew, instinctively, were its eyes. Malekar. The footage was silent, but I could almost hear Sarah's final, terrified scream as Lena made the first incision. The dark, shadowy form of the demon seemed to inhale, to feed on the raw agony. Then, the most terrifying thing happened, just as Lena was about to deliver the final fatal cut. She paused. She looked up from her victim, her eyes finding the exact, hidden location of the camera in the observation room. She looked directly at me, a slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. "She had your eyes, Emma," Lena's voice said, crystal clear from the monitor's speaker. I realized the footage wasn't a recording. It was a message left for me, that same stubborn refusal to accept the inevitable. The screen dissolved into static. Behind me, in the darkness of the observation room, I heard the soft metallic click of a locking mechanism engaging. I was trapped. The click of the lock was a death sentence delivered in a whisper. A cold dread, far deeper than simple fear, flooded my veins. The lights in the operating theater below hummed to life, bathing the obsidian slab in a stark, sterile glare. The door to the theater slid open, and Dr. Lena Cross stepped into the room, her movements calm, poised, as if she were about to begin a routine lecture. She looked up at the one-way mirror of my prison, her smile as radiant and predatory as ever. "I was wondering when you'd find your way down here." Her voice, amplified by hidden speakers, filled the small observation room. It was smooth, conversational, a horrifying counterpoint to the monstrous theater below. Curiosity is such a powerful catalyst, isn't it? Almost as powerful as grief. The door to my observation room hissed open behind me. I spun around, my heart seizing, but it was empty. It was an invitation, an ultimatum. An ultimatum, with no other choice, my body moving on a cold, fatalistic autopilot. I walked out of the observation room and down the short flight of stairs into the chapel of flesh. Lena watched my descent, her expression one of supreme satisfaction. "There, that's better." An audience should never be separated from the stage. "What is this, Lena?" I asked, my voice shaking but laced with a cold fury. "What the hell are you doing?" She let out a soft musical laugh. "We are doing what healers have always done, Emma. We are pushing the boundaries of life and death. We are negotiating with the forces that govern them." She gestured to the obsidian slab, to the jars of grotesque specimens, the Asclepions of the flesh. "My order. We believe that biology is merely a text, and with the right catalyst it can be rewritten. Malekar, the entity you saw on the recording, is our scribe." As she spoke the name, the air in the room grew heavy, the temperature plummeting. Shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, to coalesce. Malekar was listening, and the patients, the VIPs, I pressed, trying to keep my focus on her, not on the creeping dread at the edge of my vision. "They are the ink," she said simply. "Their pain, their fear, their life force. It fuels the scribe. In return, we learn, we achieve. Miracles, regeneration, longevity. Things you couldn't possibly imagine." Then she took a step closer, her smile vanishing, replaced by an expression of intense clinical focus. "And that brings us to your fiancé, Alex." My blood ran cold. "What about him?" "He wasn't an accident, Emma," Lena said, her voice dropping to an intimate, conspiratorial whisper. "He was my final test for initiation into the inner circle. A perfectly executed potassium chloride injection, masked by the chaos of a code blue you yourself were attending. His heart, so strong, so full of love for you. Malekar found the flavor of that grief. Exquisite. I needed to see if I could create the perfect offering." She tilted her head. "And bringing you here, so close to the echo of that foundational pain, it has made him very strong." The grief hit me like a physical blow, a raw, explosive agony that ripped a scream from my throat. And the room responded. Drawn by the raw power of my emotion, Malekar began to manifest. It poured from the polished surfaces of the surgical steel. A miasma of black smoke and shifting, scarred flesh. It rose to its full, emaciated height, a towering parody of a surgeon, its burning red eyes fixed on me, its blackened talon-like fingers clicking softly on the tiled floor. From a side door, Carla Monroe appeared, her face a grim, emotionless mask. She held a large syringe filled with a clear, viscous fluid, a powerful sedative. It had been in a trap from the start. Her coldness, her hostility. It was all designed to push me, to guide me down this exact path. "Don't fight it, Emma," Lena said calmly, as Malekar took a gliding step towards me. "Your grief will make you his most favored instrument." But grief had turned pure, incandescent rage. They had taken Alex. They had turned my pain into a demonic delicacy. As Malekar reached for me, its touch like freezer burn, I reacted. I grabbed a stainless steel tray of surgical instruments. The silver rings on my fingers scraped against the metal, and I shoved the tray forward into Malekar's chest. It shrieked, a sound of static and tearing flesh, recoiling as if burned. The holy water. I snatched one of the vials from my pocket, the one Ethan had given me, and flung its contents at the demon. The clear liquid sizzled against its shadowy form, which dissolved and writhed in agony. Lena screamed in fury. "Carla, now!" Carla lunged with the syringe. I dodged, letting her momentum carry her past me, and slammed my elbow into her side. She stumbled, dropping the syringe, which shattered on the floor. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the heaviest instrument I could find, a bone saw, and turned to face Lena. The game was over. The procedure was just beginning. The operating theater became a whirlwind of chaos. Lena, stripped of her calm superiority, fought with a feral, vicious strength. She was fast, but she wasn't a brawler. I was younger, fueled by a righteous fury that bordered on madness. Malekar, wounded by the holy water and silver, flickered at the edges of the room, a screeching, semi-corporeal mass of rage, unable to fully manifest while I held the remnants of the blessed liquid and wore the rings. I managed to corner Carla using a heavy-wheeled IV stand to pin her against a wall. She stared at me with pure, undiluted hatred. "You're ruining everything," she hissed. "He would have given us eternal life. He'll give you an eternity of this," I snarled, and brought the stand down hard on her shoulder, incapacitating her. Lena saw her acolyte fall, and her eyes narrowed. She lunged, but not at me. She went for a large, red emergency button on the wall. "If I can't have you as a willing subject," she spat, "I'll dedicate the entire facility. Lock down." Heavy steel shutters slammed down over the exits. The clinic was now a hermetically sealed tomb. My only hope was to reverse what she had started. The anchor. Malekar was tied to the clinic, but its strongest tether, its most stable vessel, was Jonas, patient hash 1913. "You can't kill a god, Emma." "Emma?" Lena screamed, as I sprinted past her back towards the elevator. "I don't have to," I yelled back over my shoulder. "I just have to evict him." The clinic upstairs was a madhouse. The lockdown had triggered alarms, and the few remaining staff and VIP patients were in a state of panic. Malekar's influence, now unbound and angry, was running rampant. Lights flickered. Equipment sparked. And ghostly, distorted whispers echoed through the halls. I saw Malekar's form flicker in a window, its talons stretching towards me. Before I burst into Jonas' room, he lay there, still, a living conduit for the horror. Lena was right behind me, her face a mask of fury. There was no time for finesse. I grabbed the emergency defibrillator cart, the crash cart. "Clear," I screamed, more to myself than anyone, and slammed the charged paddles onto Jonas' chest. His body arched, a jolt of raw electricity coursing through him. "What are you doing?" Lena shrieked, trying to pull me away. "You'll destabilize the connection. You'll kill the host. That's the idea." I yelled back, cranking the charge to maximum. I grabbed the largest syringe I could find and drew up a massive life-threatening dose of epinephrine from the cart. This wasn't a resuscitation. This was an exorcism by medicine. I was making the host body too alive, too chaotic, too strong for the parasitic entity to maintain its grip. I slammed the epinephrine into his central line and charged the paddles again. Get out of him, you son of a bitch. As the second maximized shock hit Jonah's chest, the room erupted in a flash of blinding crimson light that seemed to emanate from his very cells. A soundless psychic scream tore through the clinic, shattering windows and sending monitors exploding in showers of sparks. Malekar, its shadowy form fully manifested behind Lena, shrieked in agony. It was being violently, brutally ripped from its anchor, its essence sucked back into the now convulsing body of Jonas. A body that was no longer a quiet, compliant vessel, but a raging biological inferno. The feedback loop was catastrophic, a shockwave threw both Lena and me across the room. I hit the far wall, my head cracking against the tile, my vision swimming. Through the haze, I saw Malekar's form collapse in on itself, pulled into Jonas's chest like smoke into a vacuum. The red light in the room died, plunging us into the flickering emergency lighting. The whispers stopped. The unnatural cold vanished. The presence was gone, not destroyed, but contained, trapped. Lena pushed herself up from the floor, her leg bent at an unnatural angle. The power, the ecstatic confidence, was gone from her face, replaced by the raw animal panic of a predator who had suddenly become prey. Her connection to Malekar, her source of power and belief, was severed. She was just a woman now. A brilliant, murderous, fanatic woman in a ruined, blood-spattered room. I rose unsteadily, the bone saw still clutched in my hand. We stared at each other across the wreckage. For a moment I saw Alex's face. The savage, primitive part of me wanted to finish it, to give her the end she had given him. But I wasn't her. I wasn't a butcher in a cult. I was a nurse. My oath had been to save lives. And though I had twisted that oath tonight, I wouldn't shatter it completely. Letting the saw clatter to the floor, I turned my back on her. I smashed the fire alarm box on the wall, its piercing shriek a welcome, mundane sound. I used a chair to break through the sealed door of a fire escape. As I stumbled out into the cold, wet Seattle night, I left her there, injured and alone, for the authorities to find. I left her with the evidence in the basement, with Jonas's impossible medical readings, with the body of Carla Monroe, and with the full, crushing weight of what she had done, now without her dark god to shield her from the consequences. The official story was a mess. The Nightshade Clinic was shut down, its records seized. Lena Cross, due to her wealth and connections, was declared mentally unfit to stand trial after a spectacular, raving confession about blood gods and eternal life. She was confined to a high-security psychiatric facility for the criminally insane. The clinic itself was dismissed as the bizarre hub of a delusional, murderous cult. The supernatural element was buried, as it always is. I left Seattle that week. I left nursing. I tried to find a quiet life, a new name, a place where the shadows didn't have too many limbs. Months later, I'm working as a barista in a small, sun-drenched town in Arizona. It's a world away from the rain and steel of Seattle. One afternoon, a woman comes in. She's new to town, she says. A doctor setting up a small, private practice. She's charming, charismatic, with kind eyes and a warm smile. As I hand her the coffee, I notice a small, intricate tattoo peeking out from the cuff of her sleeve. It's a spiral, the same symbol that was carved into the obsidian altar in Nightshade's base. She thanks me, her eyes meeting mine for just a second too long. It's a pleasure to meet you, she says. I have a feeling we'll be seeing more of each other. Her name, according to the credit card she uses, is Dr. Helene Archer. An anagram, not of Lena, of Carla. The experiment wasn't destroyed. The cult wasn't just one woman. And they haven't forgotten the nurse with the grief-scented blood who managed to cage their god. They haven't forgotten me.